Is big tech a threat to our freedom? Is big tech a threat to our liberty? Is big tech the greatest threat to this country that exists right now? These are topics I'm going to be talking about, not just in this video, but in some future videos as well, some videos I've got coming out very shortly. But right now I want to talk about big tech and its threat to our speech. Is it a threat to our speech? That's the question. Let's get the answers. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. So right now, there are a lot of people that are concerned with speech. They're concerned that big tech, your social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, are actually becoming threats to our speech and are silencing dissenting voices. The question is this real? Are their concerns valid? That's what I want to look at, because I had an opinion and I've spoken about this issue before. I've spoken about how private companies, whether we like their decisions or not, have the right, the authority to say, this is who we allow on our platform, and this is whom we will not allow on our platform. It's their company, it is their platform, it is their right to choose whether or not I'm on it, whether or not you're on it, whether or not any of us are on it. But there are some people who feel that big tech, that the social media companies should not be discriminating based on ideological bends or even things like people's opinions about COVID-19, the pandemic, and vaccines. What's really interesting, though, is last week, the game appeared to change. Last week, at a press conference at the White House, Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, said some things that got antennas raised. She basically said that the White House is in contact with Facebook and other social media companies about whom they allow on and whom they kick off of their platforms. She was specifically talking about as it relates to the vaccine and what she has deemed medical misinformation. And she's saying that if people who are spreading medical information, let's say on Facebook, that they should be banned, not just from Facebook, but from other social media companies as well. This was found concerning to some people. What about you? Do you think this is natural, normal, a legitimate exercise of government authority? Let's hear some of what she had to say.
You went through kind of the top line details of this yesterday, but can you elaborate a little bit on the Facebook, the administration of Facebook flagging disinformation? And there's also some reporting that we've had that Facebook maybe hasn't been as proactive as the White House would like it to be in response to some of the flagging. So the process of how the flagging works, and then whether Facebook has been amenable to those requests.
Sure. Well, I would say first, it shouldn't come as any surprise that we're in regular touch with social media platforms, just like we're in regular touch with all of you and your media outlets about areas where we have concern, information that might be useful, information that may or may not be interesting to your viewers. You all make decisions just like the social media platforms make decisions, even though they're a private sector company and different, but just as an example. So we're regularly making sure social media platforms are aware of the latest narratives dangerous to public health that we and many other Americans are seeing across all of social and traditional media. And we work to engage with them to better understand the enforcement of social media platform policy. So let me give you an example just to illustrate it a little bit. The false narrative that remains active out there about COVID-19 vaccines causing infertility, something we've seen out there flowing on the internet quite a bit and other places as well, which has been disproven time and time again. This is troubling, but a persistent narrative that we and many have seen, and we want to know that the social media platforms are taking steps to address it. That is inaccurate, false information. If you are a parent, you would look at that information and that would naturally raise concerns, but it's inaccurate. And that is an example of the kind of information that we are flagging or raising.
And then has Facebook been as proactive as the White House would like in terms of its response to its flags?
Well, I think as I noted yesterday, Phil, there are more steps that everyone can take. And I would just note again, this is a responsibility of officials speaking, of course, on behalf of the government. It's a responsibility of members of the media. It's the responsibility of citizens and civic leaders leaders and people who are trusted voices in communities around the country. That has a broad definition. Social media platforms is one of them. And as we know, it is also there are also areas where a lot of people get news and information. Sometimes those are accurate news items reported by some of your outlets or accurate information shared by a neighbor. Sometimes there's information that is not. It is hard to discriminate, as we know. This is not a new issue, but it is an issue that is impacting people's lives. So a couple of the steps that we have, that could be constructive for the public health of the country are providing for Facebook or other platforms to measure and publicly share the impact of misinformation on their platform and the audience it's reaching. Also with the public, with all of you, to create robust enforcement strategies that bridge their properties and provide transparency about rules. You shouldn't be banned from one platform and not others for providing misinformation out there. Taking faster action against harmful posts. As you all know, information travels quite quickly. If it's up there for days and days and days, when people see it, it's hard to put that back in a box. And of course, promoting quality information. Algorithms, I don't know how they work, but they all do know how they work. So those are some of the steps that we think could be constructive for public health, for public information, for public, and the right of the public to know. Go ahead.
Just to quickly follow up on the Facebook aspect of this, you said yesterday that 12 people were producing 65% of the misinformation on vaccines on social media platforms. Do you have a sense of who those people are? Are they bad actors like Russia? And Facebook responded yesterday after the press briefing. They say that they removed 18 million pieces of COVID misinformation. They've connected more than 2 billion people to reliable information. So does the White House find that sufficient?
Clearly not, because we're talking about additional steps that should be taken. And frankly, information that media organizations could decide whether you're going to report on or not. I'm not talking just about the misinformation storyline. I'm talking about these individuals. I'm talking about how prevalent the spreading of this information is. The public has a right to know. That's the point that we're making, and we're dealing with a life or death issue here, and so everybody has a role to play in making sure there's accurate information. Obviously, those are steps they have taken. They're a private sector company. They're going to make decisions about additional steps they can take. It's clear there are more that can be taken. And actually, just on the foreign government piece, because I think that's an important point, or interesting question. The State Department's Global Engagement Center has found that Russia and China have promoted their own vaccines through messaging that undermines Western origin vaccine development programs. So, that is more than just competition about vaccines. The risk and impact there is that this type of information magnifies, the risk of potential side effects associated with Western vaccines. This is what the information, some of this misinformation is doing, and misleads the public by falsely alleging that mRNA vaccines are untested and thus risky, even though many of them are approved and have gone through the gold standard of the FDA approval process. So the PRC, for example, has also suggested that the United States hoards COVID-19 treatments and prevents other countries from acquiring vaccines, despite evidence to the contrary. But certainly pushing information out there that these tested, approved vaccines are ineffective and unhelpful. A lot of people on these platforms, they're not discriminating, as you all know, between the source of the information, and that is damaging as well. So we've seen that trend.
There is a huge difference between government providing information to the media and government controlling what information the media provides to everyone else. That's a huge difference. But what she admitted to, and the question is, did she admit to this inadvertently? Not only did she admit that the government is having improper influence over social media, she admitted that the government is having improper influence over media, over mainstream media, over our traditional media. In addition to that, she seemed to almost suggest, and now this may have been just a slip, maybe mental, maybe Freudian, that our traditional media is not private, is not really privately ran. That's what she suggested. That's what she seemed to suggest, even though I believe that was a Freudian slip on her behalf. Nonetheless, the amount of control and what she's talking about media doing, the government doing in relation to media, is not just providing media information, correct information. This is exerting improper influence on what the media is presenting to the people. In essence, what she's talking about is state-run media and state-run social media. That is a huge problem. You see, I'm a huge believer and supporter of allowing whether it be private companies, whether it be individuals, to exercise their First Amendment rights. This is different than just big tech saying, I don't want people on my platform. This is different than just Facebook deciding, okay, I don't like what this person is talking about, I'm kicking this person off my platform, than Twitter banning Donald Trump. This is something different. So right now, there are a lot of people who have been advocating for changes, who are doing victory laps. Like, see, we told you. And I'm like, whoa, this is different. I've never said that if government is telling media what to do, if government is controlling these social media companies, that they're still private companies. If government is controlling them, that's a problem. But the problem isn't that government controlling them now just makes them quasi-governmental agencies. The problem is that government shouldn't be controlling them. That's the problem. So the response is much different. The appropriate response that we should be having to this situation is much different than the response that many are having. What this is not called for, and what this is not grounds for, is greater government control over social media. And then people will say, well, what about Section 230? I'm going to be doing a breakdown on 230 extensively because it's needed. But what I'm saying is this is different. Now, this may not be new, but this is different because right now we have the United States government openly admitting that it is seeking to, attempting to, and in fact, possibly actually controlling social and traditional media. That is what we need to be attacking. We need to be attacking that relationship, that influence. We need to be making sure that that stops immediately. That is what needs to be done. We need to step up and begin taking actions to make sure that the United States government is not doing or even attempting to control social media or traditional media. Having such communications with social media companies is an improper exercise of the government's authority. It's an illegitimate exercise of the government's authority. But what about the misinformation? Number one, assuming that what they are calling misinformation is actual misinformation rather than just differences of opinion. We are adults. We have the ability to hear speech, to analyze speech, and make decisions. Now, if the government feels that the information being given is incorrect, if the government feels that the information being provided is harmful, is potentially dangerous, can potentially lead to individuals making bad decisions, the government has the opportunity to provide accurate information, truthful information that counters false narratives. The question is, if the government has no proof or no evidence, merely just conjecture, that is a problem. The government has the opportunity to provide information that may counter what it considers false information, and it has the opportunity to make sure that its information is more persuasive, has details, has evidence to back it up, so that people can then make decisions. She references the vaccine and infertility. These are questions that individuals can ask their doctors. That would be the smart thing to do. If people are taking their news off of some Facebook group or page called The Real Truth Download Exposed, that's their choice. And it's very likely that they could just be getting false information from any ridiculous source. But once again, it's their choice. They are adults. And if they're making bad choices and stupid decisions, that's on them. These are decisions that they will have to live with and the consequences of. The government has the option and the ability to say, well, this is official information provided by these scientists, and this is what we are trying to get out to you. The simple fact is, why isn't that good enough for so many people? Because the government has repeatedly shown itself to be untrustworthy. The government has repeatedly lied to the people and been caught spreading false narratives. And so now, instead of actually having to provide information and have a reputation of integrity to back it up, the government is attempting to force its opinion, its narrative, as the only permissible narrative, because they know they are lacking in credibility. The solution for the government is to stop being so shady. Will they do it? They're the government. Of course not. But like I said, this isn't new. If you think back to the 2016 election, this is kind of the same thing of what the government was trying to do. The government was mad that people were making decisions based on information and propaganda provided by somebody else. I'm of the mind, it doesn't matter if Russia was behind memes and stories. The fact is, if these were untrue, the government had every opportunity to provide truthful information to counter the false information if in fact it was false. If it was true, then the government's just mad that people were looking at information that wasn't being provided by them, and that's not a legitimate function of the government either. If people were making decisions based on opinion information provided by Russian agents, that's their choice. They have the option to examine information and to choose whether or not they like it or not. The government had the opportunity to provide its own opinion information. And quite frankly, in certain cases, like an election, maybe the government shouldn't have been providing any information, just exposing that certain information being provided was being provided by foreign governments. You see, right now, the threat isn't big tech. The threat is the control government is trying to exert over big tech. But you may say, okay, so then we just need to make sure the government isn't telling big tech what to do, isn't telling Facebook what to do, isn't telling Twitter what to do. But I'm like, wait a minute. Why did the government admit to doing these things? Because there's some who think, oh, she slipped up. No. She intentionally shared that information with us. She shared it the day before, and then she doubled down and got into details. In fact, in this past week, there have been more discussion of what Biden is saying about social media. The government is actively trying to let us know that it is trying to controlling big tech, social media. Why are they letting us know that? There's a plan. They're doing this because they think they know what we are going to do next. We have to be smarter. And I'll be dealing with that in another video that will be coming out shortly. Thank you for checking out this episode of Escaping the Echo Chamber. Of course, as always, give me the thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. And if you disagree with me, if you think, no, we got to get rid of Section 230, no, it's big tech. It's not the government. It's just big tech. They're too big. They have too much power. We got to stop them. Feel free to give me a thumbs down, but don't just give me a thumbs down and run away. Give me a thumbs down and write why in the comment section. I will address it either in a future video or in the comment section below. I'll see you next time.